Hi, do you have my voice?
Hello.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yes. So, can you hear me? Hi.
Great. I'm gonna try.
Okay.
Maybe. Can you hear me
It's
now?
nice to have you here, Dr. Lundholm. Yes, I can hear you. I can clearly hear you. Great. Okay. So, can we just wait a couple of minutes so that other participants can join?
Of course. No problem.
Thank you.
I'm just gonna check if I'm gonna share my presentation. Let's see. I'm not so familiar with the Google Meet, so I need to just find the right.
It's the one on the right side of the emoji icon. Yeah, the one with a rectangle with an upward pointer.
Yeah, present now. Right.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah.
Yes, we can see that. Yes. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation.
No problem.
Here, thank you.
The tricky part is that I don't see you now, but yeah, now I can see.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, so can you tell me a little bit about your association?
So we are a Digital Humanities Association, as you already know, and in the last, let's say, 2 years, we've started to invite digital humanities, let's say, or digital humanist researchers from different fields of humanities, like from computational linguistics, say movie studies, cultural studies, sociology, any part. And most of our, let's say, webinars are focused on bringing new voices and, familiarizing our students and the body of the academy that we have here with new topics like the most recent and innovative ongoing researches.
Great.
Yes. And the novelty of your topic was quite thrilling for us, and we wanted to explore that as well. Yeah.
Great. Did you? But I assume you had access to the whole book, right? On Digital Age, yeah. Or you found it?
No, I found the excerpt on the internet, on Google, through Google Scholar, not the whole book itself.
Okay. Yeah, because sometimes some publishers are friendly enough to publish open access. I guess it's a matter of cost, but I don't think this one is available, right? Some books are available like open access.
Yes, some books are on Routledge itself. Yeah, some of them are open access.
Yeah. Right. Can you see my presentation in presentation mode, or it's
no, it's
no.
not.
Okay. Yeah, I will switch later on because I think it's weird. This. Yeah. So. Hello.
Yes, I can hear you. And
yeah. Okay.
Picture. Yeah.
It kind of got stuck somewhere.
No. So I think we can start, and the other participants will join. Sure. So I have to first, if you don't mind, rolling the introduction and welcoming part, and then we can get to the actual webinar itself. Very good. So I'd like to welcome everyone to today's webinar titled Digital Ageism, Coping Mechanisms in the Age of Connectivity. We are thrilled to have Dr. Magdalena Kania Lundholm join us as our esteemed speaker. Dr. Lundholm is a prominent sociologist at the Larnaca University, where she leads the sociology subject area and teaches courses on digitization and society. With a PhD from Uppsala University and a rich background in communication and media sociology, she brings invaluable insights into the intersection of aging, technology, and social dynamics. Dr. Lundholm's research focuses on the experiences of older adults navigating the digital landscape, exploring themes such as digital disconnection, loneliness, and implementation of welfare technology. A recent work, including a chapter Coping in the Culture of Connectivity, sheds light on how older individuals contend with the challenges posed by digital ageism. Today's session will last approximately an hour, featuring Dr. Lundholm's presentation, followed by an interactive Q&A segment. We encourage you to engage actively and share your thoughts during the discussion. Without further ado, please join us in welcoming Dr. Magdalena Kania Lundholm to the virtual stage. The stage is yours, Doctor. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you hear me well?
Yes, clearly.
Perfect. So I'm sharing my screen now in the
Great.
presentation mode. Does it work well?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you so much for the invitation. I'm really thrilled to be here and have an opportunity to present my research. As maybe you already know, the chapter that I'm going to talk about has been published in 2023. And as you mentioned also before, I do currently other research focusing on welfare technologies, but the interest of the kind of intersection between older people and digitalization or datafication or consequences of those, particularly social consequences of those, are still very much at the center of my research. So today's talk is based on a chapter I published in this book edited by Andrea Rosales, Mireia Fernandez Ardevol, and Jakob Svensson. It's been published in 2023 in a Routledge series of new media and cyber culture. And the book, as you can see, is called Digital Ageism, How It Operates and Approaches to Tackling It. And I would like to say just a few words about this book, because this is, as probably you already know, this is one of those books that is tackling and approaching one of the recent phenomenon or recent developments in digital culture. But it's specifically focusing also on the social scientific aspect and social consequences of digitalization and technological development. And it's also focusing on specifically cultural and structural aspects of ageism that are embedded in digital technologies and their related power relations. And in this book, they depart from rather broad notion of ageism. I will talk about ageism in a while, and specifically how I kind of define it also in the chapter. But the editors of this book depart from a broad definition of ageism. Ageism understood as socially constructed age and stereotypes, social stereotypes that order the social world and permeate our culture, and also often lead to prejudices and discrimination. So the goal of my presentation today is to depart also from that definition of ageism, is to present the results of one of my projects, and also some analytical points or reflections from one of my one of my projects that started quite a while ago, and it's been called Older People and New Media. And I also would like to reflect a little bit broadly on this development, since I've been researching the intersection between older people and digital technologies and new media for at least 10 years or more. And I have to say that in this short period of time, so many things has changed. And today we actually not only talk about digitalization, but we also talk about datafication and consequences of those. So in this short period of 10 years, not only more people, older people got access to internet, but they also got more skills how to use an internet, and that obviously also impacts the culture. I will get back to it a little bit later on. But for now, I just wanted to, as I said, depart from the chapter from this book, the chapter called "Coping in the Culture of Connectivity," how older adults make sense of living with digital ageism. And the questions that I've been asking in this chapter is how older people understand and experience life with digitalization and digital technologies, and how do they discuss and respond to some stereotypical representations of older people and technologies. And I also have to say that this chapter, as I mentioned, is based on the empirical material from one of my previous projects. So the conclusions from and the analysis that I have done is the secondary analysis. The project initially was interested in more broader questions or more general questions, specifically focusing on this first question, understanding of life with digitalization, but also understanding experiences, understanding how older people approach this, what Coldren Hep called this wave of digitalization. So just briefly, because this issue of digital ageism has to do with the issue of stereotypes and stereotyping, just wanted to briefly mention how stereotyping is understood in social science. It's the concept that is broadly used, for instance, in social psychology, but also in sociology. And in sociology, we focus specifically on stereotypes and stereotyping as a way of both representing and judging people in fixed and unyielding terms. In other words, meaning that it's a way of kind of categorizing the world. It's a way of dealing with this chaos of the world around us, and kind of putting simplified notions about different categories of people. But the problematic aspects, of course, is those fixed and unyielding terms. Stereotypical notions not always, but often have rather negative connotations. And what's also important to mention is that through those ways of representing and judging people, what happens is that people in social categories, people belonging to certain social categories, are often reduced to those stereotypical categories or narratives. Meaning, for instance, when we talk about this relationship between older people and technologies, the stereotype that often comes to mind has been also circulating in media is that older people are not very tech savvy, that are rather slow, that are kind of behind this development. And these categories often, what Mike Pickering mentions, is that they carry often homogenized and naturalized attributes that are not only fixed, so to speak, that they represent quite one side notion of certain categories, but they're also quite difficult to question. They circulate in media, they circulate in our culture, and what my research also says that they are being appropriated by those specific social groups themselves, meaning that some older people kind of evaluate their computer skills or evaluate their place in this digital culture as rather kind of small or limited. They automatically see themselves through the lens of those rather negative and very limited and fixed stereotypes. So also Stuart Hall mentioned that stereotyping is a signifying practice. And signifying practice is something what we often do um, in cultures, what we do as social and cultural beings, so to say. Uh, in sociology, we also say that human beings, social actors, often look for meaning of their actions or meaning to their actions and practices. So by signifying practice, whole means that this is a way of kind of making or meaning making in the social world. So in that sense, stereotyping is also inherent part of not only individual way of categorizing social world, but also a cultural way. So this is also important to understand that these notions are often very culture specific. And this is also the context of this chapter, of this research that I have done, that it's important to understand that different cultures also have different ways of categorizing or stereotyping different social groups. And I will go back to that in a while as well. So stereotyping is a signifying practice. Stereotyping is a way of making meaning in the social world. Now, uh, the Digital Ageism book is about how ageism as a discriminatory practice is being kind of reproduced and disseminated in the digital context. But ageism, of course, is something that has existed even before new media and social media and digital culture. And according to World Health Organization, ageism is defined as prevalent, deeply ingrained, and more socially accepted than any other forms of bias, which makes it a little bit harder also to kind of fight against or even detect. And in the 2021 Global Report on Ageism, um, it is argued that age-related bias is often seen as humorous or at least harmless. People fail to see that how age and aging are framed. For instance, so-called having a senior moment, or the so-called great tsunami, referring to the demographic changes on aging societies. Um, the language that is used to describe older people, specifically older people, often perpetuates those misconceptions, and also, and that is very important to emphasize, that influences also the policies we develop and the opportunities we create or don't. So this is to say that ageism is a very strongly ingrained aspect of societies on a structural level. It often shows in kind of everyday context, everyday life, but it also influences how we go about our societies, how we define, develop policies. And that there we have actually a lot of work to do still, because a lot of policies are kind of invisibly ageist, or invisibly kind of uh, defined in terms of ageism. And what is also important to know in the shorter definition is that ageism refers to um, specifically stereotypes, prejudice, and discrimination that is directed towards others, but also to oneself, and is based on age. And um, usually we talk about age discrimination against older people because that is the one that is most prevalent or most visible and most perhaps hurtful. And yet ageism as such, of course, affects people of all ages, not specifically people over 65 or people who are retired or people who are uh, broadly defined as older. I mean, ageism refers to any type of discrimination based on age, in a similar manner as sexism, for instance, racism, and so on. Shortly, also, it's important to emphasize that ageism refers to three aspects um, how we think, and these are the stereotypes, how we think about different social groups, how those notions of stereotypes are being circulated in our cultures and reproduced. But it also refers to how we feel. And there comes also the notion of prejudice, the negative aspect that we consider, for instance, older people as not tech savvy or
Dr.
so.
Tanya, I'm
Yeah.
sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
Would you please double check these slides? I mean, we couldn't see part of them. Yeah,
Oh, okay.
because
I'm sorry.
yeah.
Um.
And put it in the slideshow mode because I think there is a, when you change them, it doesn't change here. There's a delay, and then
Oh, I'm sorry. Do you see the slide with
oh,
ageism or?
yes, there's a poster of ageism, how we think about
Yeah.
stereotypes. Yeah,
Yeah.
but it's not in
And
full screen mode. And when you move to the next one,
okay, good
we
that you
can't
say
see
because
it.
no, that's a bummer. Because it looks perfectly fine here, so I'm
Yeah.
glad you're
I
saying
think
that.
if you like share the app itself instead of the screen, I mean, share the PowerPoint app because there's an option to
Mm,
share your whole screen, just an
yeah.
app, or just a tab of your browser. So if you share the app itself or maybe the entire screen, this would
Yeah.
work. When you put it in slideshow mode, we can
Can you
see
see it
these.
now? Is it better now or
No, we can't
no?
see anything.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
No, it's fine.
Hmm. How about now? No.
No, it's still
I'm
like,
sorry.
no,
Oh,
it's fine.
that's really bad.
When you share it at the bottom, there is an option that says, stop sharing. Yeah, but I mean, you shouldn't press that. Yeah.
No, 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 no. I'm not sure. No, no, no.
Um,
It's uh. And how does it look now?
Still
No
the
change.
same. Like it's in the, the editor mode that where you can
Yeah,
edit, not the presentation.
that's really strange. Because it looks really anyway, stop presenting. Let's start from there. Um, how about now? Now I'm sharing my screen. Oi. That's really tricky. No. Um, how about now?
No, it's fine. Yeah, yeah. This is perfect.
This is
Yes.
perfect. Okay, thank you. Great. So you can see the presentation now.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Perfectly cool. Thank you.
So I had to share the whole screen. Okay, good. So yeah. So do you want me to go back somewhere or?
No, 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 no. We were
Yeah.
following, but just,
Yeah.
the slides were a little bit tricky. Yeah.
Yeah, so now it's good. Great. So yeah, so I was just summarizing basically this notion or definition of ageism as referring to three components: how we think, the stereotypes; how we feel about certain groups. That's kind of often triggered by those notions, how we think about certain groups, and also how we act. And this probably is the kind of the strongest aspect in this, that it doesn't necessarily only stop on the ways how we think and how we feel, but we actually how we act, and that also informs in some cases the social policies. So uh, now I wanted to mention a little bit briefly about this intersection between ageism and technology, or ageism rather in technology. This is so, as I mentioned, ageism is nothing new. Basically, it's probably existed as long our cultures exist, and as long as we have the capacity to articulate our thoughts in terms of referring to other people and social groups. But the notion of digital divide that has been employed by scholars to portray also the landscape of digital media users in stereotypical terms is a relatively new concept, but it's still, you can talk about the past 20 or 30 years, as long as the digital culture and digital technologies have developed. And initially, this digital notion of digital divide has been referring to the global development in terms of digital infrastructures and digital technologies, and also in terms of some sort of clash when it comes to users of those technologies. And early research has pointed out that there's been this clash or gap or divide between the so-called tech-savvy net generation or digital natives, um, uh, on the one hand, and on the other hand, those who are kind of on the other side of the divide, or on the other side of the digital spectrum, namely older people. And that in itself has been obviously a way of reproducing stereotypes, right? One of the early articles that came out already 2001 was written by this scholar named Prensky, and he coined this notion of digital immigrants. He later on, I have to mention that, kind of apologized for that, or revised his research, and mentioned that this is no longer a valid concept to use. Nevertheless, we could argue that even in research, we deal with these notions that depart from potentially stigmatizing and stereotyping ideas about certain groups, in this case, older people. Obviously, that observation, or the way of naming older people as digital immigrants has departed from this idea that, um, on the one hand, we had younger generation, younger users who were embracing digital culture, who were using social media, who were um, employing digital technologies in numerous, often very creative ways. And then on the other hand, we have those group of older people who are not necessarily as fast adopters as the younger users. So immediately scholars could see that there is this group of users that potentially can kind of risk of falling behind this development. So on the one hand, reappropriating stereotypes, on the other hand, a real concern, right, that we have a group of people in different cultural and social contexts that can potentially kind of fall behind and can potentially be excluded from this development. And this was also something that inspired my research, my own work, as I mentioned back about 10 years ago, when this discussion about the intersection between technologies and other people was initially or was growing, but was not so prominent as it is today, and specifically not when it comes to empirical research about older people. I remember I approached, after my PhD, I approached one of the professors at my old department, Uppsala University, and she happened to be a social gerontologist, and I read this article in New Media and Society, I believe, about Russian immigrants and who were using uh, digital media, who were using Facebook and other social media to communicate with their relatives, and were actually seeing many positive aspects of digital technologies, but they were rather exception proving the rule, so to speak, and not the rule in itself, so to speak, being that older people were still rather risking of falling kind of outside or behind that development. And since then, the past 10 years, the research on aging and technology has grown enormously, and there are a lot of books and articles and scholarship that focuses on different aspects of that intersection, and specifically in recent years we talk about the topic that is of digital ageism, and the consequences of ageism kind of perpetuating in also in the datafied societies. And this is also something that Svensson and Rosales were researching before they published this book on digital ageism. Mm, for instance, Jakob Svensson, he's a professor of media studies based in Malmö University in Sweden, and he did this very interesting project on the software engineers in Silicon Valley in California, and was looking, among other things, on the perceptions of age in that tech industry, and how ageism is being reinforced, for instance, through age-related stereotypes. And as you probably know, this is a very specific industry. It is an industry that is particularly kind of inhabited by rather young workers, high skilled, young, mostly in majority male, uh, middle class engineers. And in that context, that's also one of the conclusions from that research. In the context of this kind of very hyped young work culture of Silicon Valley, older workers automatically are perceived as less motivated, less enthusiastic, and even more reluctant to learn new things. So there is this widespread idea that older people are less interested in technology. Now, this is the most interesting part of that research. What it means, what does it mean, older people, right? It means different things in different contexts. In that context of this rather homogeneous, youth-oriented tech culture of Silicon Valley, 35 plus, 35 and older is considered kind of old age. So everything under 35 are young workers expected to work very long hours, expected to be available, and older, meaning 35 plus, are expected to climb up on the organizational ladder and occupy managerial positions rather than software developer positions. So in that context, older is rather young age still, right? So it's also kind of, this research challenges our own often stereotypes about what it means, to be old. I mean, it means usually we consider people who are in the retirement age, 65 plus, but in that context it's half that age. And Andrea Rosales and Mireia Fernandez Ardevol also wrote about this digital ageism elsewhere, and specifically on ageism, how it is being reproduced in digital platforms, and when it comes to older, for instance, older users, they argue that older users are often underrepresented, for instance, in the data sets that inform algorithms, that inform the data that is being fed into algorithms. So it becomes the issue of design and implementation, but it also becomes what they call developer bias. So in other words, this is to say that those often young male developers have certain stereotypical associations about the users of those platforms. And the users of those platforms that they develop are usually rather young, meaning 35 and younger. So automatically, everyone who is older than that kind of is not as represented in those data sets, which leads in the consequence to this developer bias. And developer bias is also something that as a result can become the algorithmic bias, right? Like when we Google something and what shows up on the screen in our Google search or Bing search or whatever. I mean that is the result of the data that algorithm is being has been fed with. So if we do not have enough variety of representations of older people, then we end up often with very stereotypical, very limited images. And they also emphasize that there are many ageist mechanisms on platforms themselves. Here are just few examples. Like when it comes to platform tools, for instance, there is what they call psychometric prediction. When you have this data, learning says that deprioritize or exclude certain groups. For instance, older people. Again, we can talk about racist bias, we can talk about sexist bias, we can talk about other types of biases uh, that result in this algorithmic bias and also inaccurate predictions. So meaning that those in this context ageist mechanisms are being perpetuated on those platforms, are being continuously reproduced, which becomes like this vicious circle, right? That is quite difficult to stop or difficult to change. Another example, those captcha security protocols, for instance, when those little squares when you have to click the bicycles or whatever traffic lights. For instance, this way of verifying the credibility of the user is also stereotyping in itself. One could argue it's stereotyping against individuals with cognitive issues, individuals with um, different types of physical declines or disabilities, and it's also usually we see this very urban, often Western context, right? Milieus that is also potentially discriminatory against individuals who grew up in different contexts. So those small, so to speak, quite innocent mechanisms that are on the platforms can potentially also, or often have ageist mechanisms kind of inscribed into them. So coming back to my chapter and coming back to some of the results from my research, so I departed from among others, this definition of or notion of culture of connectivity that has been developed by Jose van Dijk in her 2013 book, which is a um, uh, critical, how should I say, evaluation or history, a short history of social media. And in that book, she argues that what we experience, and that's remember that's 11 years ago, but uh, in culture of connectivity, what we're dealing with is this normalization of the so-called platform sociality, and she particularly refers to the way we interact and are on the social networking platforms and how we are on social media, for instance, and the rules and routines and the ways of being, so to speak, in that context. And she argues that there are coded structures that are profoundly altering also the nature of our connections and creations and interactions. So meaning that that specific way that is expected of us as users to socialize on social media is also kind of being transported into the culture around us. What we see, among others, is the commercialization of content, the so-called producers also. Users become producers. We know our data is being used, for instance, by advertisers and uh, that they make profit on that. But also the social exchange or social interaction is also based on those neoliberal economic principles, right? I give you something, you give me something in exchange. I give you a like, I give you a like, I'm expecting you like me back, so to speak. And also connectivity as such is often used as a resource. Connectivity access to digital media, access to digital technologies, for instance, for the purpose of self-branding or self-promotion, so to speak. And last but not least, this culture of connectivity is also an ageist culture. This is something that has to be emphasized. This is the culture where technology, technological development, digital culture is often associated with youth, with young people, creativity, development. These are the notions that enthusiasm and so on. These are the notions that are often kind of automatically ascribed to the young people. And what I also discuss in this chapter is this paradox, what I call paradoxes of culture of connectivity, because on the one hand we have um, those interventions to increase connectivity and digital engagement. These are often regulated by national policies, right? Like digitalization policies. We want more people to be on board, so to speak, more connectivity, more engagement, which results also in digital divides and digital inequalities. Some people are kind of faster adopters than the others. But on the other hand, we also have initiatives to decrease this hyper connectivity and digital engagement. We specifically in kind of more Western context, we talk about infobesity, we talk about digital addiction, we talk about negative consequences of use or overuse of digital technologies, and consequently also. Uh, in consequence of that, there are initiatives such as digital detox or digital withdrawal or temporal digital disconnection, and so on and so forth. So on the one hand, more connection, on the other hand, more control over connectivity. So in a way, this is also a little bit of a paradox. And when we talk about scholarly interventions in terms of these issues of culture of connectivity, on the one hand, we have, for instance, science technology studies, STS, and also aging studies, specifically more critical aging studies that emphasize specifically more recently we have research that emphasizes also against this notion of young people and social media, digital media. There is focus also on older people's agency and co-constitution of aging and technology, and challenging also this what is called the interventionist logic, right? That is often inscribed in policies, saying that we need more connectivity, we need more older people to jump in on this development, we need more initiatives. This is a very prominent discourse, for instance, in Sweden, saying that we need more initiatives, we need more ways of encouraging specifically vulnerable groups and older people included to give them more opportunities to be digitalized. And we have also media scholarship, and in media scholarship in the past 10 years or so, there is a discussion about destabilizing the norm of digital connectivity. Uh, it this scholarship emphasizes ways of challenging this idea that connectivity is always something very good, right? Connectivity is something that is needed. Yes, it is in terms of economic development. Of course, it is in terms of increased connections and possibilities, but there are also some negative aspects of that. So in this way, it's also challenging this kind of techno-deterministic logic, saying that technology is a solution for everything or for all social problems, right? Just briefly, in Sweden, 2017 was released this policy document saying that Sweden wanted to become one of the world's leaders when it comes to digitization. This document has been amended a few years back, but basically this idea is still very prominent, that issues of sustainability and digitalization are being very, very prominent. And in recent years, specifically when it comes to development of artificial intelligence, for instance. And when it comes to practice, this is also something I mentioned in this chapter, is that I think I mentioned the numbers from 2020, that about 96-97% of population has been using internet, has been connected to internet, specifically broadband and fiber. And in Sweden, there has been this long going kind of development initiatives of developing a lot of both private sector, but also in the public sector, that a lot of services that have been previously more analog, for instance, like you go to the bank and take out your money, or make your um, uh, run your errands in the bank. Nowadays, most majority of the citizens are being encouraged to do all those things online. So for that, you, for instance, need this bank identification. You need those uh, digital numbers, digital uh, uh, footprints that allow you to access all those services. And we're talking about a variety of services when it comes to, for instance, public transportation, when you have to buy a ticket using a smartphone, when you come in contact with authorities, with the public services, but also, of course, a lot of private actors, including, for instance, healthcare, doctors' services that are being offered online. So, what's important in this context to mention is that um, getting kind of online, or getting digitalized, is no longer a matter of lifestyle, or kind of curiosity. It becomes more and more a necessity for all the citizens in Sweden. You have to be connected, whether you like it or not. And that when kind of the issue of older people and digitalization becomes also I wouldn't say problem, but becomes an issue, because this is no longer a situation where they can choose an alternative. Those alternatives are continuously removed, so to speak. And my informants, the people who I was talking to, they were very adamant about those changes and those developments. And the research that I've done, among others, was this focus group interviews, 6 focus groups with 30 participants aged from 68 to 88, quite a broad span, 12 of them with university degree, 6 with high school degree, and 11 with elementary degree. And when it comes to their usage or non-usage, so to speak, 17 of them were pretty much, about half of them were daily or so-called narrow users, whereas the rest was roughly defined as narrow users or non-users. So it was quite of a kind of variety of different forms of usage and non-usage, rather a spectrum rather than a kind of binary distinction between users and non-users. Um, and one of the conclusions was that what I call coping in the culture of connectivity is a way of navigating that digital and automatically ageist culture, right? So again, whether you like it or not, so to speak, people are aging uh, in digital culture, and they are more or less forced to live with digital ageism. Um, and there are at least two ways, not necessarily mutually exclusive, two ways of navigating that landscape of digital connectivity, ageist culture. On one hand, we see notions of self-ageism, something that I mentioned in the beginning, namely internalizing the stereotypes. We, the older people, we are so and so, they young people are so and so. So this notion, I did the discourse analysis on the transcripts from those interviews. So I was particularly interested in also in this linguistic discursive notions, how they articulate ways of navigating the culture. So there is this notion of we and them, which points to different ways of self-ageism, right? Appropriating those stereotypes. We older people, we who are not tech savvy. As a matter of fact, when I approach one of the focus groups, one person raised their hand and said, "Look, I don't know what you're gonna ask about, but I'm not that good at computers. Are you gonna test our computer skills?" And I said, "No, no, no. This is not the not the goal of this research. I want you to discuss and talk about your experiences. Any experience is valid. Any experience is interesting for this research, right?" But they automatically had this notion that me as a researcher coming and asking them about digital devices would be about testing their skills, right? That says a lot also how they are kind of approaching, how they are being met in this context, right, by others. So it's not so surprising that some of them are appropriating those stereotypes. But the other way um, of navigating was also distancing. So we have they are quite as I said, they're not mutually exclusive. You might as well at the same time appropriate some stereotypes, but you might also um, distance yourself from other stereotypes. And one, this particular stereotype that is, I would say, still, even many years after circulating, for instance, in Swedish media, is this, and not kind of wrongly, I would say, is this idea that older people often fall victim of online phishing, online fraud, right? And that has been an issue also in recent years, because those criminal activities have become even more sophisticated. So they are actually, calling older people and presenting themselves as they're calling from the bank, and something is wrong with your bank account, asking them to use their identification code, and then automatically getting access and wiping the account. So there's been a lot of reporting on that. So some media has been really active in raising that awareness. Um, so when I asked my informants, do you think um, it's only older people who get cheated online? That was immediately met with the reaction, no, this is not an age issue. Anyone can fall victim of online phishing and online fraud. This is not a question of old age. So that was a very clear distancing, also discursive distancing from those stereotypes, saying, okay, yes, we're slow, we might fall behind, but falling victim for online fraud, this is not an age issue, so to speak. So to wrap this up, coping in this culture of connectivity implies understanding that the so-called banal ageism perpetuates our culture of connectivity. Older people, whether they like it, whether they want it or not, are forced to navigate it. This is what I call living with digital ageism and dealing with digital culture. Uh, it also implies navigating uh, and requiring different resources. Would it be economic, a way to afford to own a computer, a way to buy a internet connection, stable internet connection? It could be a way of articulating those stereotypes, for instance, discursive resources, but also symbolic, right? How what does it mean to be an older person living with digital culture? It is also, I would argue, important to reconsider the material and ideological underpinnings of digital technologies, for whom and by whom. Here we go back to this, very young, creative, enthusiastic youth in this young industry that is often uh, uh, willing or not excluding older users. That is also important to emphasize, that specifically um, research on aging and technologies emphasizes also the importance of so-called co-design and co-creation, that older people should be included in the design process, either as like kind of focus groups in the early stages, but also in testing. Basically, if someone develops a product for a specific group, but not even that. I mean, older people are like any other social groups should be included, both when it comes to data sets that inform algorithms, but also product development. And it's also important to understand that ageism in this culture of connectivity is ultimately part of a larger structural matrix of power intersecting structures such as gender, race, class, and so on, so on. So it's not a kind of separate social category. They often intersect with other forms of bias, prejudice, and also discrimination in some cases. Yes, and last but not least, living with digital culture implies living also with digital ages. It implies developing different ways of navigating it, accepting it, or challenging it in many different ways. Yeah, here's just a list of my more and less recent publications, but as you can see, I've been doing some this work on older people and digital media for a while now, and in different projects. Yes, thank you. Do you have any questions? Yes. Maybe I can. Shall I stop
Yes.
share?
Do you have my voice? That was very great. Thank you very much
Thank
for your
you.
explanation. Yeah. And it was very thought
Yeah.
provoking. So I had a question regarding so if we want to, let's say, deconstruct this, okay, like digitalization and the digital world, and also the matter of age, okay, one, and from a very humanities point of view, we can say that. So we can possibly argue that that age is associated metaphorically with, I don't know, like petrified, lethargic, lack of movement, such things, negative stuffs, and old age, and but the digital itself, we can say that, okay, cutting edge, innovative, new. And this is deeply ingrained in our, I guess, everyone's mind around the world. And like the new generation brings revolution and, changes, radically changes things. So are we considering this when we are, let's say, dealing with digital ageism, the fact that these are two, let's say, seemingly antonyms, or let's say, I'm saying that they are like binary oppositions, that we are putting them together. So how can we target that again? And is it because that we try to cope with them rather than changing it? Because as at the end of your presentation, you implied that, I mean, coping implies living with it and
Yeah.
accepting it. We are trying to change the notion of it, say distancing ourselves, but again, it's not something that could be resolved because it's relevant and self-perpetuating, and it's going to happen, throughout millennials.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I agree. I mean, that goes to show how deeply ingrained the notions of age um, are in our cultures. Um, and I would say that the tech industry, partially because it looks the way it looks, right?
Yeah.
Partially because of the discourses around it, as you mentioned, that circulate creativity, youth. They're kind of um, uh, most kind of spread associations or
Yeah.
notions, right? So that in itself is also pointing to this kind
Mhm.
of dualistic stereotypes,
Yeah.
like even in the common language, right? Old and new, right? New
Yeah.
is usually valued as something
That's right.
more
Yeah.
positive, right? But I
Mhm.
think a lot of research, and partially in media studies, but I think there's a lot of work going on in critical gerontology, for instance, and sociology, trying to challenge that idea that
Uh-huh.
that old is bad.
Mm. Yeah.
And I'm thinking, in our culture, it's a matter also of discourses circulating that kind of will normalize certain notion of old. And I'm thinking, for instance, of the notion of sustainability. In Sweden, this issue of sustainability is a huge topic. I mean, it's like I see it also like almost like, trends circulating, and,
Mhm.
and nowadays everyone talks about sustainability. And sustainability is, it's economic, social,
Mhm.
cultural. uh,
Multifaceted from different
yeah,
aspects.
yeah. And I'm thinking in terms of sustainability on everyday basis. We talk about, recycling and reusing things. So
Yeah.
so old stuff gets a little bit better associations,
Mhm.
when we criticize the consumer culture. It's all about getting rid of things and buying new things,
Yeah.
chasing after the new model of the phone or the new
Mhm.
model of the gadgets, whatever that would be. But in this sustainability discourse, it's about repairing. It's about loving the things you have or
Reusing
passing them
them, yeah,
over. Yes.
cycling.
Yeah, so I'm thinking that maybe it's about those notions, how old is being associated. It's about changing this. So maybe there is some something positive. uh,
Yes, of course.
mm,
And something else that pop up into my mind is that, so is it going to, let's say, be less intense as it is maybe in 100 years, so that we all have, I mean, people in future, all of them are digitally native, so we won't
mm,
have any
mm,
immigrants. So would it,
mm,
like, exacerbate this thing or no? Do you think that there would be
mm,
more minute divisions between these
mm,
age groups or no? I mean, there would be a very collective, or this would be solved because
mm.
everyone are natives in that, I don't know,
Yeah,
atmosphere. Yeah.
yeah.
So is
So
there
I'm
any?
thinking, you mentioned 100 years. I mean, things have changed in 10 years
Yeah.
time.
Yes, of
uh,
course.
so w- and I'm saying this because that idea has been, I remember when I started, being interested in those questions. And there were sayings or notions saying that, like, this is not going to be an issue in 10 years or 20 years. We're going to have everyone is going to be digitized, and everyone's going to use digital technologies more or less. So older people will die out, and we're out of the problem. But sociologists have been really emphasizing that this is not the case. And I think it goes deeper also into understanding that digital culture is not what was thought to be, let's say, in the 1990s, that it's like a separate culture, a virtual culture, when you can be whatever you like and it's separate. No, it's like it really reflects this existing social structures, the material social structures. So as long as we have, all those different forms of discrimination in the analog real life, I mean, they're going to be perpetuated. But the last part of your question is interesting also, because you mentioned that there may be new divisions, and there will be new kind of forms of
Yeah, as
distinctions.
we
And
have that division, yeah, there would be maybe
yeah,
new. But you're
yeah,
saying that we are living in a digital habitus, so there's no
yeah.
analog digital, just one.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
And I mean, there are a lot of so-called, digital underdogs. There's research that kind of follows this digital divide notion, but focuses, now we talk about third or fourth digital divide. It's
yeah,
not about having a computer or not. It's about your skills and your knowledge, how to use it, how to search for information, how to be able to critically evaluate information and sources of information, right?
that's right. Thank you
Mm,
very much.
mm,
And from a practical point of view, I mean, the praxis aspect of it, should we, how can we teach,
mm,
these people? I'm not going to say geriatrics. I mean, but
mm,
I mean, the senior citizens of a
mm,
nation.
mm,
So how could that possibly be achieved? Like through government
mm,
funding,
yeah.
subsidies, or should be a government program, or
Mm,
like education on self level, or promoting, I don't know, like self education for them.
mm. Mm. I think there are different initiatives. I can say for Sweden, for instance, those initiatives were both, so to speak, top down and bottom up. You have
Yeah.
several like public funded initiatives, specifically, for instance, in public libraries, where there is a trained personnel offering always help and support. But there are also, I think, a lot of bottom-up initiatives, for instance, by retirees associations organizing free courses. And from I understand from my research also that these initiatives are very much appreciated because they often have this better understanding of older people's needs in terms of language. Like you have older people teaching other older people, like understanding that you have to be
Yeah, I
quite
get it.
pedagogical, because a lot of my informants were saying like, I don't understand what the young person is saying. They use those strange words that
Correct.
don't mean nothing to me. So I think it's important to have both,
Yeah, yeah,
both publicly funded, but also um initiatives
yeah,
bottom up. Yeah.
yeah. Got it. Thank you. That was great.
Mhm.
I really enjoyed it. And I thank you very much for,
Thank
again,
you.
accepting our invitation and also giving this awesome lecture. So, does anyone else have any question? Um, I think we have a question in the chat box.
Yeah.
So, I can read
uh,
it if you
yeah,
want
you
to.
can read. Yeah, I can see it, but you
Yeah.
can read it. Yeah.
Yes. So, thanks for the thought provoking presentation. Digital ageism leads to dis and slash disabilism as the media becomes not accessible for all requirements. How did the program in Sweden come to action? Was it suggested from concerned activists? What were the steps that to take? I'm quite inspired and looking forward to happening the very same in Iran.
Mm. Thank you for the question. I mean, I've shown you this slide with the 2017 was kind of this official government um, digitalization policy. That is also kind of like an overarching discourse in Sweden that Sweden wants to become the leader of digitalization, and I would say it was very much a kind of government driven initiative. um, and Sweden has their own like a digitalization ministry, and so that issue has been discussed and taken seriously quite early on, I would say. I mean, 2017 came the official policy, but those activities, so to speak, were, I would say, were going on from the early 2000s, in different kind of initiatives, focusing maybe on the labor market and so on. But from, I would say, from 2017 onwards, this is like an overarching initiative, like a dominant kind of discourse or yeah.
And what about the intersectionality of ableism and ageism, like in the
Mm,
digital, milieu? So do they go
mm,
hand in hand together? Because, I guess
mm,
one part of the question was that as people age, they are rendered or framed
yeah.
as disabled or,
Mm,
lacking that
mm,
ability to, let's say, I don't know, man or navigate, let's say that the
mm,
devices that they have or,
yeah.
making their life or, making through their
Mm,
lives. So what
mm.
is the intersectionality in that?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting point. I think that intersectionality is a very important issue. It goes, as you say, I mean, it goes beyond the age issue. I mean, there are, obviously people who are disabled in different ways, different ages. There is this concept coined by Shaw, I believe, in a book called techno-ableism, and she argues that techno-ableism is something that is also perpetuated in the tech industry, and that is the idea that it's based on this idea that technology is kind of a solution for everything, a solution for different types of issues, but not necessarily taking into account those social categories, like, for instance, disability of different kinds, not only physical disabilities, but I'm thinking also in terms of neurodivergence, it, yeah,
Yeah.
other types of disabilities. Uh, so it's a little bit kind of over-optimistic and techno-deterministic idea that technology can solve every problem. This is not really necessarily the case.
Yeah.
Mm.
And this was, a notion that was, we could say, happened after the Industrial Revolution, or early 20th century. And it has been, proliferating from then.
Yeah, yeah.
And yeah, we have a question, another question, a chat box.
Mm.
So could you please provide us with more successful case studies of older people overcoming self-ageism through the use of technology?
Thank you. I think there are a lot of positive cases. I don't know if there are cases of overcoming. I mean, this is something I haven't studied. It would be a very interesting project. But I think there are a lot of initiatives raising kind of awareness of not only ageism as a problem in society, but also awareness of the importance of kind of digital habitus or whatever digital knowledge. So, and in sociology and social gerontology, there are those concepts of different ages, right? And specific distinction of the so-called third and fourth age. Third age, it was a term coined by Chris Gilliard in early 2000s, I believe, and he makes this distinction of between third age, which are people like 65, 75 plus, and then fourth age, 75 plus and above. And the so-called third age, 65, 75, is a very interesting group. And I can say specifically in Sweden, because this is a group that has quite rather strong purchasing power. These are individuals who are successful often in their professional life, and these are often the groups who are also very active in terms of using digital technologies. In one of my projects, I had the chance to talk to them, and they're very active in different fields. So I would say this is definitely a positive example. They're navigating different apps, they're purchasing different devices and make use of them, and so I would say the socially privileged groups, socially privileged in terms of economical resources or social resources, networking, they are often also quite successful when it comes to overcoming those biases, because they have the right resources. So they on the personal level are quite successful. They can, yeah, they can buy things. I spoke to a woman rather recently. It was a project on loneliness, but she happened to have this Apple Watch, and she was telling me that this is the greatest device ever, because she can set it up, and when she happens to fall down or something, it immediately contacts her family, and
Taking the
and she felt,
pills, yeah,
yeah, and she felt very, very
safe,
safe. Yeah, yeah. And
sharing
but
that.
yeah.
That's great. So thank you for providing more insights on this. Quite an interesting topic. So I think we don't have any questions anymore. So we can call it a yes. So amazing, and have a nice rest of your day, and Merry Christmas. Yes.
Thank you. Thank
Thank
you.
you for also accepting on this day and in the last day of
Yeah.
2024. Yeah.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Yeah, great.
Thank
So thank you very much. And I
you.
think that's it. We can call the day.
Mm.
And
Have a good
yes,
day.
thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Bye
Take care.
bye.
Bye. See ya. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And yes, so you can follow us on Telegram and Instagram and YouTube and other social platforms with DHC underscore Shiraz University. And yes, no sweat. So happy New Year, everyone, and take care. Bye.